There we go. Now that we got that out of the way, good afternoon, everybody. Really glad that you could join us. Really excited to be here. First year back at Best Practices since 2020, because, you know, there was stuff that went on. So we're back. So I'm really glad to be here. I've had an opportunity to share this talk before. There we go. And I feel like there's always new things that I am learning, new things that you guys are learning. So really hope if you've been in this talk before, it'll be a lot of the same information. If it's anybody been here when I've spoken before, a couple of you, cool. Cody, yes, thank you. The heckling section will be over here. So if they get out of line, those are my coworkers. So kick them out or whatever it is you see fit to do. My name is Chris Cawthorn. I'm the Director of Technical Worship and Technical Arts and Worship at St. John's. That means I lead our contemporary band. I train our volunteers. I help out with our live stream. I keep the AV systems alive and running at our church. I've been on staff there for 18 years. I've been a member at St. John's since I was 1. So I've been around a long time. So I put together a lot of services. We have 2 spaces, a contemporary service, a traditional service. We also have a daughter church, a mission church, and a farming community not too far from Bakersfield in the Central California where we live. And so I put their services together as well. So I've done this a lot. And I've seen it done well lots of places. I've seen it done less well lots of places, and that's why we are here. This is my wife, my child. We've been married for about 9 years. Our son just turned 5 on Sunday. He's very cute. His name is Sam. I know what you're asking. Yes, I've got another photo. He's right there. He's really cute. If you want to see it later, I'll show it to you. Loves dinosaurs, loves Star Wars, loves Legos, Pokemon, all the things normal 5-year-olds love. So before I go on, I want to give you guys a disclaimer. I don't know what I'm talking about. And what I mean by that is I don't know what I'm talking about in the context of your churches. I don't know you guys. I don't know your spaces. I don't know your style of worship. I don't know what software you're using. I don't know how your worship teams and your tech teams and your pastoral leadership teams all work together. I don't know any of those things. So all I can tell you is here are the things we've learned in our years of doing this. And hopefully you can learn something. So what that means is if you get through into this talk and you're like, this guy, it just doesn't work for us. Go ahead and leave. That's cool. Or you read the course description. You're like, what I read and what he's saying isn't exactly what I thought. Go ahead and take off. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Because I do the same thing at talks when, you feel like they bait and switched me or whatever it was. So you're not going to hurt my feelings if you got to go. Make eye contact with me as you leave so I know that's like this is because of you. You don't have to like do the whole phone thing like, and then never come back. Don't worry about it. So, if you got to leave, you got to leave. So why are you each here? I don't know. But why am I here? It's because, like I said, I've seen it before. I've been at conferences, churches, special events where the slides are terrible. They're behind, they're misspelled. So that might be the group you're in where you're doing digital presentation and it's kind of bad. You may be in a group that's thinking about, is there anybody who's not projecting at all and is kind of thinking about, like in this day and age, are there any churches that are like that? I'm not sure there are, but in this room. Okay. So you might be a church that was thinking about getting into it and haven't yet. Or you're a church that feels like they do it pretty well. They bat like, 900 on the service, and there's just those few things that they want to improve on. So we're probably all kind of in those groups. Hopefully we find things that we're doing. Hopefully there's things you can learn from here that help you do things better at whatever level of digital presentation you're doing. So the next question is, why is digital presentation important? At least for me. Why do we do what we do? I'm a tech guy. I love gear. But technology is only useful if it helps us out. Technology can be the salt of our worship services, right? It's helps make the meal better. It helps tell the story we're trying to tell on Sundays. But if you throw a bunch of salt in whatever it is you're making, you can ruin whatever that thing is really, really quickly. So if you're going to use these tools, especially if there is maybe pushback in your congregations about why do we hang that giant thing on our wall or whatever it might be, we want to make sure that we use it to the best of our ability. So why digital presentation? Really, it kind of comes down to 3 things. One of the things I say, it eliminates confusion. If you've got a bulletin with 4, 5, 6, 7 pages in it, and you set it down because you've just done the meet and greet or whatever it might be, and you pick it up, now you got to shuffle through trying to figure out where it is. We can kind of say, this is the thing we want you to focus on right here, right now in this part of the service. It allows us to engage with the space, engage with the worship leaders, engage with the other congregational participants, engage with their Lord better, right? It gets their heads out of a bulletin or out of a hymnal, and, free their hands. I know we're Lutheran, so there won't be any more of that, I promise. And again, it can help us tell a story and engage with what it is that our churches and our teams, creative teams, are trying to do, which is, of course, lead people to Jesus. So, the first thing we're going to talk about, because it is the most important, is presentation technique. It's the most important thing. It doesn't really matter what your slides look like, whether there's backgrounds or not backgrounds, whether it's big text or small text, whether it's fancy font or not fancy font. If the presentation technique isn't good, none of the other stuff matters. And I'd say focus on those things first, which is why we're going to start with it. So, a couple things. Not everybody can be a presentation operator. A lot of pastors, volunteer coordinators at churches, somebody will say, I want to serve tech, because it's just a space bar, right? Anybody can do this. No, not everybody can do it. I liken it to, especially in grade school growing up, you might have to read in class, and there would be some kids who might read like, in the beginning, God created, right? It's like kind of one word at a time, and then there are kids in the same class reading, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and they go on from it, right? Like there's full thought, there's cohesive understanding of what the structure is of the thing that they're doing. And I'm not saying it's the same people, but it's the same type, right? They're the people who are kind of reading word by word by word, like, okay, change now. And there are people who kind of see what's going on in the context of the screen, and can be proactive instead of reactive to what's going on. So one of the ways that you can help your presentation operators out is to build trust with them. Slide operators are encouraged. Basically, it goes both ways. The band has to trust that the slide operator is going to put the slides up at the right time, especially if they're like reading off of a screen on the back wall, and they don't have music in front of them. And also, the presentation operator has to have trust that the band is going to sing the next thing that's on the slides, right? Because you can break down that trust really quickly either way. So we encourage our song operators, our presentation operators, to know the songs that we're playing, listen along to them during the week as we send them out through Planning Center. They're at all of our rehearsals so that they know what it is we're playing, how we're playing it. They don't just roll in. It's a little more difficult in our traditional service because our organists will practice the hymns, but it's more for them just to practice the hymns. They don't go through a top to bottom. So it's a little more difficult for them. But presentations for them are also a little different. We put for the most part full text of hymns, full verses of hymns on slides. We'll talk more about that later, and how those things are different, how it makes it a little easier for them. So know the songs, know how long the intro is. Is it 4 measures? Is it 8 measures? Is it 16 measures? If there's an instrumental, how long does that last? Except, the band has to know those things. Your operators should be too. Preparation. When your operator rolls in on a Sunday morning or a rehearsal on a Thursday night or whatever those things are, they should have faith that it's basically ready to go. We sometimes make a few tweaks. We always make mistakes. But I try to make sure. So I pick the songs for our band in our our worship contemporary service. I also put the slides together, which is really helpful because I kind of know where I'm going most of the time. But the roadmaps for the songs are set up before rehearsal, and with very few exceptions do we deviate from that. And if we do, we kind of know, like, okay, the end of this song, at the end of the service, might really benefit from an a cappella chorus, or coming out of a song that's sort of thematic to the sermon, right? We might loop around if I'm feeling it, so just be ready to do that. Like, that's about as outside the box as we get. For the most part, what we rehearse at rehearsal is what we play on Sunday morning. We don't put labels on screen as far as verse, chorus, bridge, those kinds of things. We don't put repeats. We don't put, like, if there's O's or ahs or any of those kind of ad-libby things, we don't put those up on the screen as well. It's just the kind of the thing we want the congregation to be able to sing. If there's repeated phrases, the song Good, Good Father, if you're familiar with it, it's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are, and I'm loved by you. That's 3 slides, maybe 3 slides of 3 who you are's. It's not one that the slide operator has to know, okay, on the 3rd one I switch. Right? Because that's just confusion. We're setting them up to fail. Right, no 3X's, yeah. So again, like I mentioned this before, the operator is a member of the band. I mean, our sound guys are the member of the band, our lighting guys are the member of the band. We're all working together to try to achieve the same goal. So we include them in our weekend planning. That they get invites, they get the songs. Like whether or not they listen to them, I don't know, but they have all that information for them. Song presentation is hard. Focus is everything. In either of our services, when you've got responsive things and multiple readings and 4 or 5 hymns or contemporary songs, you may have 250 slides, 200 slides in a service. That's 200 chances for them to mess up, right? Like, it doesn't take a very big margin of error. Like, you mess up once or twice, that's, a half or 1% on 200 slides. That's pretty good. That's 99. Like, where I come from, that's basically an A, right? But it takes a lot of concentration. They got to be in it the whole game. Pastors, worship leaders, know your operator's name, because things will go wrong because either something has gone wrong in the booth or you've maybe changed horses midstream, whatever it might be. And it's so much better when you can say, Eric, can you get that picture up for me? Instead of, hey, because it just seems like something has gone wrong, right? But Eric, it kind of lets the congregation know, I, as the leader, as the presenter, have done something that they weren't expecting. And instead of getting all those eyes turning around and glaring at them, I saw a meme recently about like a congregational member who turned into a pillar of salt when they looked back to glare at the sound booth and something didn't happen right. I'm like, that would be so awesome. So again, point out if you're jumping around, if that's applicable to what's going on. If something has happened in the back of the booth, that's fine, just roll with it. But still, like, hey, here's where we're going, here's where we're picking up, whatever it might be. So what does that mean? For our operators, the way that we train our operators is we want them to lead songs and readings. We want them to be ahead of what's coming. And when it comes to the message, we want them to follow. So we don't want to burst the pastor's bubble as he's preaching, right? We want to wait for him to make his fantastic point before we put the blank up there instead of being ahead. It's the opposite. We want our congregation to have the confidence to know what's coming next so that they don't get lost in a lurch mid-song, mid-confession, mid-whatever that thing might be. And we'll look at some practical examples of that. And, well, basically, right now. So follow the message. Again, don't make the pastor's point for him. Once the pastor kind of moves on to the next section, pull the blank down or pull the passage of Scripture down or whatever it is so that there's not necessarily a disconnect when people are staring at the screen being like, well, he's not talking about that. Well, he was, but we've moved on. And again, it kind of helps drive them to the next point, drive your congregation as they're following along on their bulletin or whatever it might be to their next point. So we're going to do a little bit of a sing-along here. I've picked a couple of verses of Come Thou Font of Every Blessing. Yeah? I don't know how you feel about Q&A, but I had a quick question if you don't mind. Sure. So the follow the message, what is the thinking or idea behind the pastors doing the clicker during their message? Because we don't give them that option. See, we don't right now, and they've asked a few times, so that's why I'm asking. Because inevitably these things don't seem to work over very far distances unless you pay a lot of money for them, and even then they hit the advance button 5 times and they got to go back, and the pastors have a hard enough job already as it is trying to keep the attention of the couple hundred people in our room. Now I'm not. Yeah. Now if you got a pastor who's been rolling that way for their entire life, great. Yeah. So. Now we get. Yeah.
And it always works. Our pastor, everybody's happy. He prints out his sermon and then he designates where he wants us to
One of ours does the script,
Yeah.
and he designates where to put it, but he always puts it in a way that we're stealing his thunder. And I'm like, and I don't get it in enough time to sit there and circle and go change it here.
Yeah, I see the point.
Yeah, we've kind of trained our pastors in a way that seems to work for both of us. It's not a word for word transcript, but it's pretty close. They expound on things, but there's nice big bold like here's You know, when I get it, I know exactly what's going to go up on the screen because it's big and bold. And we had a pastor in the past who had so much information they wanted to convey to the congregation. They're like, well, put these other things on the screen while I'm talking about this thing. And it took us a while to kind of break him of that because, like, they're going to read that and not pay attention to you, or pay attention to you and not read that. And so it's like, no, what's the thing you want them?
Break the habit of putting like an entire chapter of the Bible
Yeah.
on one slide.
Yeah. So, working with pastors, as you all know, is difficult. I'm just going to leave that there. So, and like I said, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know your situation. So if you got pastors who can do it, great. But it's just never been a thing that we've done. Yeah. I'm going to try to do this, and I will tell you, I've practiced these slides, and we're gonna sing and do slide advanced technique right, and then I'm gonna try to do it wrong. And about half the time, I have a hard time doing it wrong because it's like you just. yeah. Stacey, you want to come up? I got a couple verses. Hopefully they're the less familiar verses of "Come Thou Font of Every Blessing." I've got a little music. Let's sing along a little bit. I'll try it with this clicker. Hopefully it doesn't bite me. Uh-oh, there should be music. Oh, I bet this is muted here.
Case in point.
Oh no! Oh, hold on. Technology. I'm new. It's my first day. Sound. Oh, there we go. Well, it says it's connected. It worked before.
I didn't change a thing.
I swear.
This is the whole point. You're here. Let's see.
Yeah. This is very validating.
Yeah. I can see where you're making noise.
No, you did this on purpose. That's exactly right. No, he's teaching us something.
Exo gear.
Yeah, it's a teaching.
The old reboot.
It's meaning to.
That's right. It's the.
Turn it off and
Turn it back.
What are you connected to? Are you connected? There, it says there. All right, let's see. All right, here we go. Hold on. All right. All right, now it works. Here we go. I was lost in utter darkness till you came and rescued me. All right. So I was roughly 2 to 3 words before the end of the slide there for each of those changes, right? Did anybody not sing the end of the slides because I was too early? No, right? Like because our brains see it. You know that hymn, right? That's. But the point is, right? Our brains see it, read it, know it, understand it, and you can move on early, and you're not going to leave anybody behind. Now I'm going to try to do this poorly. We've all been here. We know what this looks like, right? This is just a good reminder for us of what it is. So here's another verse. All right, so that was basically like on the word. On the first, right? The word was up there when it was time for you to sing it. Why weren't you all singing it? Because it takes our brains a second to figure out where it is on the slide, process it, then sing it, right? This is, I want to say it's not hard. This is really hard. Again, putting the right people in the right seats is the key to to doing this well. And you got to be unafraid. The worship leaders, the technical directors, the pastors, whoever it is that's in charge of those volunteers, of if you cannot train them, or if they cannot be trained, because that's two different things, right? You can be a poor teacher, or they can be, this could be a skill that they just don't have. You have to be okay with saying, we need to find some place else for you, because being afraid to hurt one person's feeling is coming at the detriment of all the people sitting in your seats on Sunday morning. If all of a sudden they disconnect from the musical worship portion of our services, which is really important, right? God loves us. Hopefully, and our response to his love for us, we want to sing to him at least for 20 minutes a week on a Sunday. Hopefully, right? So that's really kind of the whole thing. If you get nothing else from this talk, there's more. Trust me, there's more. You could totally leave now and be like, hey, this is going to be something we're going to work harder on. And I've got some tips later on ways that you can actually make this really easy for volunteers, but it comes at a technical and financial cost. So, but we'll move on. So we're going to talk a little bit more now about presentation tools. I put a poll in the app asking what tools you're using. A lot of people are using ProPresenter, a fair number are using PowerPoint. And then there was a whole lot of other. What's the other? I know that there's Faith Life Proclaim. That was one of the other. How many people are using Proclaim? Are you using it because you really like the tool, or because your pastor really likes that it integrates with Logos? And it's free. That's a good one. I mean, I totally get budget drives. Okay, cool. I end up get budget drives decisions sometimes, yeah?
Easy worship.
Easy worship, okay, yeah. I had Easy Worship, Media Shout, ProPresenter, Keynote, PowerPoint. I think those, and then other was, I was just curious what the other, because there were a lot. So, yeah. Song. Okay, cool. Cool. We use ProPresenter at St. John's. We have for a long time. It's kind of the industry standard. It is not inexpensive, although none of the tools are. And the things we use, like, it's expensive to do things well, right? How many of us have organs in our churches that cost, $500,000 or $1 million? Like, right? So, instruments are expensive. Guitars are expensive. Computers are expensive. Lights are expensive. To do stuff. So we use ProPresenter 7. We've been using it since, I think, ProPresenter 3. Easy Worship 7. All the stuff we're going to talk about here, for the most part, works with all of these tools. There are a few that, like, oh, this tool would really do that thing better than others, but I'm trying not to dwell on those things. Media Shout, you might be using Media Shout. You might be a Keynote user. You might be a PowerPoint user. And if you've got one of these still lying around in your church, thus ends the comedic portion of the talk today. But I've been singing on a worship team at St. John's since I was roughly 13 or 14 years old, and I am 42 as of next Monday. And we've used some variation of basically every single thing up there. We had printed bulletins. I remember transparencies with the worship team. We went to PowerPoint and Keynote. We went to Easy Worship for a while. We've been on ProPresenter ever since. So all of these things really, you can use these tools well. So we're going to talk pros and cons about these tools here for just a second. The pros of basically ProPresenter, Media Shout, Easy Worship, Proclaim is they're library-based. What that means is you have kind of like in iTunes or Apple Music, right? You've got all your songs, and you put those songs into a playlist. Well, all the songs still exist in the library. So they're library-based, and that means you can really pull from the library at any point. Keynote and PowerPoint, for the most part, you got to build your presentation, and your presentation is what it is throughout the remainder of your service. So if a worship leader calls an audible and like, hey, we're going to sing I Love You, Lord, and I Lift My Voice, or whatever, we're going to call an audible after the message. A little more difficult to do. You got to exit out of the program. You got to find it in whatever file it is, open it up, cut and paste the slides in, or be running two instances of PowerPoint or Keynote side by side. That's just pretty tough. Most of these tools integrate with Song Select, with CCLI, so when you're doing a new song. Now, hymns is a different story, and we'll talk a little bit about that with traditional stuff. But we're doing a new song. If you're paying for Song Select CCLI, type the name of the song in, imports it in with whatever formatting your templates you've given it, and then you just have to kind of nudge and massage the formatting from there. There's Bible integration, and I'll show that. If your pastor likes to use Bible verses a lot, or you're like me and every once in a while just realize you didn't put it in on a Sunday, and you got to make sure you get it up as the kids are heading off to Sunday school, and he says, hey, we're in Acts chapter 16, and you've got last week's Acts chapter 15 thing in there. A whole lot easier to do than trying to pull it up on Bible Gateway, cut and paste it into your PowerPoint presentation. Flexibility. Anybody start streaming in the last 3 years, just for any reason at all? Yeah. Some of these tools make streaming much more simple as far as making sure your congregation can see words, readings, all those things at home, in the room, all at the same time without having to add multiple computers, multiple operators, that sort of thing. Planning Center Online, some of the tools you can actually build your service in Planning Center and basically spit it out into ProPresenter or some of these other things. It kind of works. And they'll help you do CCLI reporting. So they'll basically keep a running tab of what songs you've done or what songs you've imported from CCLI, and you can spit those things out when it's your time to report. Woo! Love that 6 months of the year. That's always fun. But it helps you out. You can just spit out one big spreadsheet that says you did this song 3 times, that song 2 times, this song once, whatever, and put it all into CCLI. The cons of some of these more advanced tools, they're expensive. But again, good tools typically are. If you're a mechanic, right, buy once, cry once. Instead of spending a little bit of money on the tool you think might work, finding out it doesn't do what you want it to do. $400 for a single seat, $1,000 for a site license. That's ProPresenter's pricing. And then there's an annual renewal of $179 or $449 a year, which gets you all of the updates, live, actual, real person on the phone, tech support, all those kinds of things, which you don't get. Who are you calling at Microsoft when PowerPoint doesn't do what you want it to do, or Keynote, or whatever those things are? A steeper learning curve, just because they do more, but just because it has the tools doesn't mean you have to use all the tools. So you can kind of fold things into your workflow a little bit at a time as you get volunteers trained up. And the best way to know if you've trained a volunteer well to do things is to have them teach someone else to do it. So if one of your operators can't train somebody else to be an operator, they probably need a little more training. Again, overwhelming feature set. There's just a lot of stuff they do, which is really great, until it breaks something or until you decide you're going to try to jump in with 2 feet onto whatever that thing is. You're running Easy Worship or Media Shout, and somebody brings you a thumb drive with their Keynote or their PowerPoint in it. You got to kind of scramble a little bit. You can always spit those things out as images and throw them in whatever presentation tool you're doing. But if they really love their animations, they're going to lose the animations, and then you got to deal with a presenter who's like, "Why didn't that thing zip onto the screen? Because it didn't need to. Be more entertaining." I don't know, right? Like if you're relying on zippy animations to wow the people you're talking to. As I said, ProPresenter especially has helped us out immensely since we started streaming. From one computer, I'm sending out a feed to our main projector LED wall in our room. I'm sending out a feed that is formatted differently for our live stream, and I'm sending out a feed that is formatted differently for TVs in the lobby. Basically all at the same time with one computer. So here's our space. We've got a big LED wall above our stage that just went in the last few months. So if you're watching at home online, that's what it would look like. That's me over there playing guitar. We had a bunch of people gone at a winter camp this week, so that's why there's only 3 of us up there. But yeah, this gets spit out of the same computer as that. It's pretty cool. When our pastors are speaking, we've got lower thirds that would then mimic what people are seeing in the house for their fill in the blanks. Here's our traditional space. Again, we do something similar there. There's also a confidence monitor on the back wall that our teams can see what's coming. Looks a little bit like this, where here's the current slide. There's any slide notes that there might be, and then there's the next slide. So your singers or people who are doing the readings, if they're reading them off the back wall, know exactly what's coming, which also helps give them confidence in case your operator is not exactly 100% on. At least your worship leaders or your readers or whoever it is can still kind of stay on. So your congregation might get left behind, but the person they're watching lead hopefully is able to stay a little bit more on the ball. Does anybody use multi-tracks in their worship with their teams? A couple of you. Is anybody doing song automation with it? Okay, so a couple of you. So I'm going to do this. So this is Glorious Day. I've got. Oh, that's a terrible sound. I have multi-tracks, the iPad app running that we use to run our click and our ears on. And hold on. You'll just have to hear it on here on the iPad, because we don't want to go through that whole thing again. So Hopefully I got the volume up. Look, Ma, no hands. And if you're going through rehearsal and you're like, hey, let's pick it up at the bridge, guys, your operator doesn't need to necessarily know where that is. It'll change here in a second. So we do this for all of our songs in our contemporary space, and I've not had one operator complain that I took songs away from them. Because I know that's one of the things people like, but you're taking their job away from them. Yeah, you're taking the hardest part of their job away from them. And you're leaving them to do things like readings and messages, and because there's still announcement slides. There's still plenty of that stuff to be done in the service that's important. You're just not, like we experienced when we all sang along together, messing up half the room when they don't know exactly what's coming next. And it's pretty cool. And I've been able to train I've been able to have somebody come in basically on the day to say, I'm really short, and it's the sister of somebody who helps us out on a regular basis, and be like, hey, hang out back here, learn the song. They're going to help you out, and there'll be people that kind of handheld you, but you're going to do the readings, you're going to do the announcement slides, you're going to do the pastor's message. And for the most part, they do really, really great. So what would normally take like a week of training during Vacation Bible School, which is where we often train our presentation ops, because it's 5 days of intensive, lots and lots of slides and videos and music and all the other things. It's a really great. And if they screw up there, we want them to do great. But if they screw up there, it's not a huge deal. So there was a hand up. Right there.
So one of the things that I've heard from my presentation people is a main complaint is the fact that they're not able to participate.
Like you mean like worship, or you?
And so taking that part of the responsibility away, I think, is the part
Yeah.
that they want to participate in the most. Is
True.
that, being able to sing, and I know for myself, if I start singing, forget it.
Yeah, and my wife who for a long time was our primary operator and would do most of the training, because I'm up front on Sundays. When she operates, like, she's got a hand in the air. Like, it's just different strokes for different strokes. I mean, like she's great at it, but yeah, I know other people who, like, as soon as they start singing, yeah, yeah. Now, unfortunately, that only works if your band is on a click and you have a tool that will allow you to do that. I basically have a wireless MIDI connection between this and the computer that does all that stuff. Hymns, unless your organist is playing to a click and you want to do that every week, it's not going to happen. Yes.
Can you explain a little bit, I don't know if you know how you do that, because we're just trying to put this sort of thing together, and so we're running our click off an iPad on the stage, and we're running the slides in the back, and there's got to be a way to connect.
Yeah, that's specific functionality between the playback app and, I mean, it can spit MIDI things. Like you could control the lights in your building. Like if your light board takes, so it spits MIDI out. I have to go through the songs when they're new. I only have to do it once for every song, but the first time we do a new song, I have to go through and I have to put those MIDI cues in exactly where I want them. I get to the point now where I can typically do it through one playthrough of the song, maybe two, if there's some. Yeah, it has to be set up. Now, once it's done for that song, it gets saved, and then the next time we do it, and the next time we do it, and the next time we do it. Yeah, and you have to have a track player that does MIDI, and then you have to be using one of the tools, which most of them do. Most of the higher end ones do. Keynote, PowerPoint don't do that. But yes.
What about the backgrounds?
We're going to talk a little bit about that. I got a whole section on backgrounds.
With multi-tracks.
Oh.
When you put the words up, how do you change?
So the first MIDI cue is slide 1 of a specific document in your playlist. So like if your first song is the third item in your service after welcome announcements, meet and greet, when you play that song, it says, or there's a cue right at the beginning that says, all right, on item 4 in the playlist, trigger slide 1 at this time, and slide 1 is the background. So it didn't do it there because I triggered it automatically. I mean, you could have your person in the back hit it. Every once in a while, I look up during a prayer or something, and I realize like the song background's there because they got a little antsy and bounced ahead after a prayer or something. So we're going to talk about slide design. High legibility should be for your first priority. I don't know your spaces. There aren't going to be hard and fast numbers on this font size and this boldness and that kind of thing. I've got some tips and tricks to help with legibility in some of these places, but legibility again should be your first priority. So if I say I think your slides should look like that, and your screens are so small in your room that doesn't work, that obviously doesn't work. Some of it's kind of three little bears, like you kind of, it's like too big, too little, just right. Like you kind of know it when you see it. To me, that is too many lines on a slide. Now I know we all know Amazing Grace, so that's not a huge deal. But if it's a hymn we're a little less familiar with, because if you take your eyes off the slide for a second, the baby next to you cries or somebody drops something, or you close your eyes because you're that type of worshiper. When you open your eyes, you got to find your place again, and that's really difficult. It can be really difficult. So that's too many. I would probably put it together like this: Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Why? Because that's a complete thought, right? Yeah. Music, for the most part, is poetry. There are stanzas and phrases and ideas, and so if we want to put those full, complete ideas and phrases on screen. So Amazing saved a wretch like me, once was lost, now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. Like I said, there are no perfect rules. It's the three little bears. That just feels big. Does it feel big? It feels cramped, that feels too small. Right? And that feels about right. There's a hand up in the back, yeah.
Yeah, so if you use 3 or 4 lines on a screen like this for the in-room, on this live streaming, does it have to be those same 3 or 4 lines?
You can
have a certain amount of real estate.
Yeah, you can do some weird things like you could shrink this text box down. Although this you couldn't because of the way that it's formatted, but you could shrink the text box down so that it would force a word wrap in the room, but then on your slide you'd have a full width text box, and so that it wouldn't word wrap there. And so you could do 3 slides in. You could do 3 lines in your room and 2 lines on your live stream. We've just forced it to in our main room for songs we're 2 lines all the time. You can disagree with me on that, but we're 2 lines all the time. And so it's like what you saw with the white bars. And then in our traditional space, it's a stained glassy kind of out of focus background with the same number of lines as what's in the room. And we do more in the room for hymns, especially because a lot of the times that phrasing is just longer. So yeah, you can do it. It's just a lot of extra work. The way I've gotten it down now, it only takes an extra 15 minutes of my week to make sure that both rooms are formatting online, because you got to go through every single slide to make sure that something, all of a sudden you don't lose something off the screen, because yeah.
We do the same. It's some songs, just a natural phrasing and breathing. Mm-hmm. It's hard to get it on there where the congregation can sing it well with only 2 lines.
Right.
And so people have thrown out, hey, can we have more lines on the screen? Well, then if you do that all the time, it has a negative impact as well.
Yeah. We're going to look at, that looks fine. It's, it's a little low contrast, especially if you have more ambient light. If I open the blinds in the back of the room or turn these overheads on, it's going to be, that would work. You start putting weird backgrounds in, and all of a sudden you start losing it. So all of your software can do this, right? You can put an outline, a stroke on your text, which is going to help it pop right off the page. I feel like this looks kind of old-fashioned. The background looks old-fashioned too, but the text itself with the big black line around it, because that was easier for software to do than Drop Shadow was live, a live render of Drop Shadow for a long time. So you had a hand up?
How do you may be getting to this later,
Yep.
How do you feel about the capitalization of?
Definitely can talk about it. Yep.
Okay.
So this is actually one of the few places where I have some actual numbers. So this is ProPresenter specific, but that's a drop shadow of 180 degrees, a length of 0, which means it's basically smashed as close to the back of the text, and then just a big blur, a big radius. So it's just really blurred out. So it's not like that hard cut drop shadow where it looks like they cut out the words, and pasted on underneath. That's floating 5 inches off the paper. It just helps it stand out. So if you look at it there compared to there, right? It doesn't necessarily scream drop shadow, but it helps it pop out. I've actually got, that's both of them together. It just doesn't look good. Don't do that. It's just too much. So Templates are your friends. All these, for the most part, all of these tools, again, PowerPoint and Keynote are kind of the outliers here. They don't do templates really well. They do.
We just do the churchier colors in the background.
Yeah, that work. Yeah, they could. You can do kind of some of these things, but you can when you import the stuff into the software, it will automatically format it how you at this font, this capitalization, this drop shadow. It'll even break onto slides if you've got returns in a lot of the time. So you can take a full block of a song, 5 verses, throw it in, it'll make that 5 slides. And then maybe you have to break those slides into multiples if that's what you're doing for your verses. But use templates anywhere you can. Throughout the presentation here, I use like 30 of them. And anytime I do something like for the second time in one of these, on a Sunday morning, whenever it is, I build a template for it, so it's just there ready for me if I need it again. Let's talk about widows, orphans, and phrasings. Some of you guys may know what that means. Here's an orphan. Yeah, that's right. There's another one. Once was lost, now found. Yeah, right. Just make your text a little smaller. Don't leave those things behind, because that was blind, but now I see. That's a whole and complete thought there. So it might make it look more like this, right? Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Again, full and complete thought and phrase. You're going to hate Amazing Grace by the end of this talk, by the way. I partially do it so that it's focusing less on what song it is that we're looking at and more about the idea. I once was lost, now I'm found, was blind, but now I'm see. Here's another kind of orphan, right? This one should go up there, if you can do that. Again, with probably here, what would happen is your text box is a little too small, and so it just forced a word wrap where you didn't want it to word wrap. So you'd put a hard return in after the comma, or before the was, really. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. 2 lines on a slide. Okay, but that's not a full, right? There's the rest of the thought. But that's also then the beginning of the next thought, right? Or the next phrase. So these are... So if you're going to commit to 2 lines per slide, you may not be able to do that with a song like this, or you'd have to really kind of, now obviously you do Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me, that would be 2 lines on a slide. But so you may have to adjust how you present things. Going back to, I didn't say there were like numbers, font sizes, those kinds of things. Find an older person in your congregation who you trust and take them into your worship space and have them sit in the back of the room and say, how does this work? How does this look? Is that big enough? Too small? Too much? Now, you can't necessarily make 100% of your decisions based off the one person who's a little cranky about the size of your slides, right? We try to do the best we can, and you'd encourage them maybe to find a closer place to sit or whatever those things are, but that's going to be the best way for you to figure out what kind of works in your room, and then you can build templates from that, right? You say, all right, we know this font size works, we know this many lines per page, or this many lines per slide, how many lines, yeah.
How much variation can you have? Because that's something I like to, like, you get those ugly, dangly things, but you would have to make it so small to make it all fit.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, yeah.
So then what do you do? Yeah, like, sometimes...
Yeah, you play it by ear. Like, we generally stick with the font size for songs, and we just try to make it work. Fortunately, that we don't have, especially in the contemporary world, there aren't any really, really long phrases. And often if the phrase is so long, you usually split it in half anyway, and people don't miss what it is you're saying. There, just left behind. Just, I don't know. Don't leave those things behind.
I had one thing I
Yeah.
thought recently in ProPresenter. I was going through slide deck, and there was like some weird alignment issues, and it took me a while to figure out I had invisible spaces knocking off how things were.
Oh, yeah.
Because we do 2, maybe 3, depending on phrasing, so sometimes I have a third line.
And extra returns at the end.
And extra
Yeah.
returns at the end, and it bumps it up and down.
Yeah.
So like look for those invisible things that are knocking things off.
Yeah, for us, and yeah, actually, I've got something about, kind of related to that coming up. In our contemporary space, I would much rather do 2 lines on one slide and 1 line on the next than 3 lines on a slide, because we just never do 3, and so all of a sudden for it to be 3 just seems strange. So that's kind of how we get around some of those things where, where I don't want to do 3 lines. I just don't. That's just. It makes the lower thirds look messy, and in the room it'd be fine, but lower thirds for our online people just looks a little strange compared to. So again, full and complete thoughts and phrases. Copyright information. You guys know you're supposed to be displaying this stuff, right? Yes. Okay. CCLI states specifically it has to be listed with the song, not just like in a slide somewhere within your service. It needs to be listed either before, during, or after the song. onelicense.net for those of you who are doing a lot of hymn stuff. They actually say you can just put it all on one slide if you want and stick it anywhere in your service. They don't care. But it needs to have song title, author, publisher, copyright date, the CCLI number, and that's your church's CCLI number, not the song number. And then the onelicense.net number that you were assigned when you pay for that licensing. So I'm not going to belabor that point there. So you come up to the end of Amazing Grace. From there, No Less Days, when we first begun, bam, there it is. Whee! Just needs to look like that. And it's very nebulous. They basically say just on the slide, big enough to read, whatever that means. I try to get it kind of as small as I can in the room, and you don't have to display it on your live streams. They say that's not a thing you need to do. So, yep. Yeah, I don't know.
That's an interesting thing because we have had it blocked before because
Oh, they're going to block you. Doesn't matter. I mean, like if the content service is going to block you, it doesn't matter what licensing you say you have, what you put on your slide, because all they're listening for is does what you're playing match the basically song thumbprint that we have in our algorithm. They're not reading the text on the slides or anything like that. So unfortunately, and if you're a heavy user of multitracks, that happens a little more often because what you're playing along with your band is what is the recording. So it's easier to kind of trip those things. Like I said, we don't put oohs and la-las and repeats on our slides. Just no. There should be a no smoking slash through there, but I broke something. So somebody had a hand up. Right? Yeah.
About the licensing. Can you get CCLI and CDLI and live streaming, all three things, into one number?
I think they bundle it for you. Yeah, I think so.
And I think you get a better deal on
I think so. Yeah.
pricing, too.
Watch out watch out for rogue returns or rogue spaces. When we've been there 10,000 years, here's our eye line. We kind of try to keep eye lines the same, and then you've got a rogue carriage return in here, and boop. And that's just annoying to me. I don't know what it is. Like if I'm singing along and all of a sudden the thing goes, psh, I have the type of weird brain that's like, that's wrong. And then I got it, and then it takes me a little bit of time to kind of get back into the moment of what it is, the song we're singing and whatever those things are. So be careful of those guys in there. I look at every slide in our contemporary space, line by line, as if it was the service. Once I put it in ProPresenter, the guys that operate the slides in our other room do the same thing on Sunday mornings when they come in, checking to make sure we don't have spelling mistakes and that kind of thing. But hopefully, looking for some of these other strange oddities that might be in there as well. So we're going to talk kind of slide design specifically if you're a more contemporary space. So the hot trend right now is no or minimal punctuation. I do put commas on repeated phrases. You are good. What is that? King of my heart. Like you're good, comma good, because our brains are kind of like, did they mean to put two of the same word, or you are good when there's nothing good in me, right? I'll put a comma in between those two you are goods because it does help our brain. That's one of the few places that I use punctuation in our contemporary space. Capitalized phrases, not lines. So I think someone asked about one of the lines in Amazing Grace that was not capitalized. We'll talk about that in a minute. Or don't capitalize at all, which is a little strange. But my hope is built on nothing less. That's not a complete phrase. And this is also not a complete phrase in Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. So I would not. I would put that up because that's a complete sentence, right? My hope is built in nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness, right? So don't capitalize the second line because it throws thought processes off, in my opinion.
What would you do with the next slide if it's still in the same sentence?
Well, here starts with the letter I. So. But I would capitalize it no matter what. Now I'll tell you how our church gets around it here in just a second. You may have figured it out already by looking ahead. Capitalize nothing except names for God. We tried this for a little while. I didn't like it. It just seems weird. It's too antithetical to what we've all learned in school with the way that grammar is supposed to work. But some people say, we're putting the focus on God and the Creator and not on ourselves or any of those other things. Or capitalize everything. This is what we do. And I know there's an argument to be made this is less legible for people, and it totally is. But it also avoids a little bit like they just understand we've made a specific choice that this is the way things. It's not that we forgot punctuation. It's not that we forgot to capitalize that line that you think should be capitalized because it's the next line. We specifically made the choice to make it look this way. And people, for the most part, are okay with it. Again, with only 2 lines on a slide and nice big in the room, some of those, and I understand if people with dyslexia and some of those things, this can be more difficult for them to read. So that's something for you to consider when you're doing it in your space. And again, that's where we got the comma on those repeated phrases, because if you pull it out, I don't know, I think our brain, it's like those brain teaser things where they put like 2 thes in the middle of a phrase, and you're like, you just never read it. Because you're a light, right? We put blank slides in for all of our interludes. If there's an instrumental in song, there's a blank slide there. Helps the congregation know they're not supposed to sing, and then the text comes up shortly before they're supposed to sing, and then hopefully they're ready to go for it. So those are kind of some of the big general ideas for more traditional spaces. We're going to look at more contemporary spaces, more traditional spaces. This is more difficult, I think, because tradition has more tradition and baggage associated with it, right? And we're working off longer printed, more historical documents and things like that. And hymns look the way hymns look, and whether or not you've got pews, whether you've got hymnals in the pew. Keep it simple, smart people. So basically, if you print a bulletin, match the bulletin as much as possible. So that, again, if people are looking down at one thing and then they look up, it doesn't look drastically different. Including punctuation. So in our traditional service, avoid duplication wherever possible. Pre-COVID, we had a printed bulletin. Sometime before that, we took the hymns out to try to make them shorter, just so we were wasting less paper. So we would have the hymn and the hymn number listed, but then the text of the hymn was all on the slides. That provided us the opportunity that if somebody screwed something up and we said we're doing 1, 3, and 5, and we accidentally put up 1, 4, and 5, nobody knows, because there's no mismatch between their bulletin. You don't have the people who are doing this singing one thing and the people reading that singing another thing. So we took that out. It saved paper. And then actually our bulletin went away entirely during COVID. And now we just have a weekly notes sheet of what's going on in the church, and the pastors fill in. And everything is on the slides as far as responsive readings, all of that kind of stuff. So again, way more punctuation, right? This is exactly as the hymn would be as you pull it from the bulletin, or from the hymnal. So semicolons and all. Who really knows what a semicolon does? I don't, but they're all over the place in hymns, let me tell you. So you could maybe do this. This would be a little bit more of a contemporary way to display a hymn. But anywhere where there's a capitalization in the hymnal, it winds up on the screens, right? That's something different. So capitalization, all of the punctuation, wherever it might be. Again, a comma where there's a repeated it as well in there. In our liturgy and responsive readings, again, we tried to make this match the hymnal as close as possible, so that no matter where they were looking, they understood context clues, right? Like if you italicize what it is your pastor or leader is saying, and maybe you bold the thing that the congregation is saying, we do the same thing on the screens. Now, again, we don't print this anywhere anymore. We could do whatever we wanted, but this is just the way we've always done it. And so if you've been a long-time member at St. John's, it's recognizable to you. We did change the name from pastor to leader and from congregation to people, partially because for a while we would have lay leaders who would be leading some of these things, and we didn't want to call them pastors. All of our pastors are leaders, not all of our leaders are pastors. So we do leader and people, and then on the next slide I ditch, just it saves a little bit of space, and that's again also how it was printed in our bulletin. And again, you can't really do this with templates. Like the template will either apply italics to everything or the semi-bold to everything. So I got to go through every time I import a confession absolution or responsive reading of some kind and change that half. There's just not really a good way to get around it. These things take work.
I do have one way.
Oh, good.
Because we do the same thing, except I dropped all the L's, P's, and D's,
Okay.
all that stuff, and I just do. And one of our members suggested, and it's brilliant. The pastor section is not only italic, but it's a slightly different color, and I use wheat on the presenter. And then there's a space, and then the congregation.
Right, but when you import it, how do you get it to do that?
So I just, I have whatever was there last week, and then I take in and I just copy paste, and I find that quicker
Okay.
to go back
Okay.
individually and then add slides, you
Right.
copy paste the slide,
Okay.
and then that is
So
the
we do-
template.
Cool.
Because then I'm not
Got it.
importing so much as just, because it takes me longer to massage things than to just do my control V, da-da-da-da-da.
Right. Okay. Cool.
So,
Cool.
I don't know if that
One of the churches I work for does that also. We were doing that also until they got a confidence monitor. And on the back wall, there's no yellow and white. But there can be. Really?
Yeah.
There can be.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I do a cyan and white.
On the back wall, it
Mhm.
shows up that way?
Yep.
I mean, I know that the next thing you're gonna say shows up, ours shows up in yellow.
Yeah,
But
you can set that.
But the current one is divided into two colors?
Yeah.
Learned something today.
And then when we this slide, this is our congregational prayer. The prayer is longer than what I have here, and I don't want a ton of text here. But on the next slide, the prayer continues up there where the L is. Basically, everyone's eye line from slide to slide is kind of used to hitting that spot on the screen, right? So then when you go to the next thing,
Oh, so you don't,
nope, because I don't want people to be confused. So.
they should know that you
Yeah, yeah. There's no L colon there. It's still semi-bold. Yeah.
How did you get the paragraph to move over?
ProPresenter 7 finally, for like the first year that it was out, did tabs badly. It does it better now, but still not perfectly. So the template has the tabs built into it. So basically it's not the top tab, it's the bottom tab. So that word wrap to a specific spot. So it's just in the template. For a long time when it didn't, I would have to break it and paste in 4 spaces to every single line. So I'm really glad that they kind of got it a little better. Yeah. Because you can't do like tab in ProPresenter. Tabs break. It puts hard carriage returns in when you on secondary outputs like for streams. I found. So all of a sudden, instead of tabbing it in, it keeps it to the same spot but drops it down a line. It's strange. It's one of the places where ProPresenter could really improve. Everything else seems to be pretty good. Yeah.
What is your opinion on justifying text?
On justifying text.
Not or
Yeah, so as you've seen, all of our songs has been centered. I think just because that was the way that songs went from like the time that digital presentation kind of started going. I think that's just the way most of us see it. Bible readings and responsive things, I put standard left justification because that's the way we're used to reading those things. And I don't have a better excuse for why we do it that way. It's just because we always have.
organized brain likes it.
Yeah, I've been to some places where they've I was at a camp one year where they right justified and stuck it all down at the bottom corner, and it was really cool. It was a very specific artistic look, and it worked there. It was a youth camp, it worked for that space. Wouldn't probably work for our congregation, but yeah, you can kind of once you get your presentation down really well, and people aren't getting thrown off by the words, and they trust what you're putting on the screen, that gives you more leeway to be a little more artistic with it. Because they're like, whatever it looks like, I know that the thing I need to sing or say or do is there where I need it. Yeah.
One of the things that I did when it came to like divine services, we still follow divine services, and you would have the same. It's said the same way in Divine Service 1, but then the wording is maybe slightly different in Divine Service 2 or whatever. I just have everything set up, my libraries are set up as Divine Services, and then all I have to do is change the color of the background.
Yep.
And that's it. And we use 2 colors. We don't even denote anything, leader or follower,
Right.
congregation. We just,
Okay.
it's always 2 colors, whatever.
Yeah,
That's the first.
Yeah,
color.
we typically use DS1 most often, but I've got confessions and some of those other things from others, and I just have it'll be DS1 confession, DS2 confession, so that searching the library I can find the one because they're like 90% the same except for when they're not, right? And then you can just pull in the right one. Yeah.
I just wondered a question on what your rule is on this. My general rule has always been when you do responsive reading stuff is to try my best not to break or not to have the next slide start with the congregation
Yes.
part, but have it start with the leader.
Right.
Because, the
Yeah.
pastor's
Yeah,
gonna have
and if you notice, we did that everywhere except for where that corporate prayer or that collective prayer was too long for the slide. But every single slide starts with the pastor because the pastor can see the next slide on the back wall.
Right.
Or if he's got the bulletin in front of him. Yeah, we do the same thing. Yeah. So even if it's 2 single lines, and I could probably put either another line of pastor, or I still it's always pastor congregational response, new slide, pastor congregational response. Yep.
Question you had before.
Uh-huh.
I guess I'm really sensitive to the phrasing.
Yep.
You had a couple orphan words where you had semicolon, the next slide. The wheres.
The wheeze.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Because people are going to take a breath.
Right. Yeah, because we stream, even before we streamed, I didn't do anything about it. That was just the way. That would be the way it would show up in the room. But because we stream, if I put a return in there, it's going to put a return on our stream. And where this is 8 lines, our stream I think is 6, because it actually fits more lines or more text on. So it's going to put a carriage return in all those places. And then I couldn't have this much text on a slide, or I'd have to have a lower third that allowed for 8 lines of text. So that's, yeah.
I have a workaround for that
All
I
right.
use, because I have a couple of different looks defined to where I just label it like thirds text, thirds notes, and I use those notes.
We do too, yeah. I never I try not to put more than I think 6 lines on a slide, on a lower third. Scripture readings, we put a reference up at the beginning as our reader, whoever it is so that people can hopefully flip there in their books or their iPads or their whatevers. And then now you'll notice this is more text, but they're not having to read it out loud, right? They're just having to follow it with their eyes and they're hearing it with their ears. So if they're not tracking 100% with the added help of the pastor or the reader reading it, they really kind of track along with it.
Keep the reading on each page.
Again, it'd be a lower third issue, and it's also just a visual one to have it up there. Yeah, you could totally do that. Again, these are what work for us. But yeah, I know a lot of churches like to do that. Yeah. And then if you notice, I try, although this one is broken. Let's see. Among many brothers should be on the end of the first slide, if I could fit it. I try to break readings. Here, we'll go here because this probably is right. So here's a responsive that we have when we do the Holy Gospel. So I try to break on punctuation because again, it gives the people reading at home or in the room a natural break there. Even though there's more space for words, I try to break it on punctuation. Sometimes you just can't do that, and so I might try to figure out where the natural break in the phrase would be, even if there's not a comma or semicolon or a period there or whatever, and try to break it there, if I can do that. And then again, Gospel Lord, responsive stuff. Yeah.
Do you? I didn't notice. I'm guessing no. On the beginning of any of the standard liturgies, do you ever put the beginning notes? That the organist would be playing?
No, because we're not that traditional in our traditional space.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all led by a pastor. Yeah, we don't do cantors or that kind of stuff with very rare occasion. Our messages are all we've got message graphics for all of our series, and it just looks like what they'd find on the back of the program, on the back of the bulletin, with their fill in the blanks. I think, let's see, do I have any? Pro presenter will do fill in the blanks if you want. We don't in our room. We just wait to put up the whole thought until they're done. On a very rare occasion, the pastor will specifically say, I want this half of this thought put up with the blank in and this half not. And then I might either do a fill in the blank or I might actually do 2 slides that look the same, except that you're just missing the second half so that it can come up. So that's how our messages look. Again, if you get nothing else from this talk up to that point and want to head out, you can do that. There's a hand up in the back of the room. That would be cool. We'll talk a little bit about background choice and some of that stuff going on next.
One thing we struggle with Pro Presenter seating.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 3 or 4 computers that need seated, and the playlist doesn't always sync down in the same order that it was on top of
Yeah.
the computer. Is that unique unique to us? Or?
No. I think syncing between all the tools is, except for, there's one that's fully online, and I can't remember which. There's one presentation software that's like fully web-driven. Is it Proclaim? Okay, yeah. That one apparently does that really, really well, but everybody else does cloud syncing really poorly. So we don't do any of the syncing stuff. We just build it on one computer. Once we know it's right, we transfer it over to a new computer. But that also means that in the event that they find a spelling mistake in a hymn or something like that, that I've got to make sure I get notified of it, or it will be there the next time, and the next time, and the next time, unless I correct it on my computer. Yeah.
We solved that with Mac by screen sharing. I will actually use my laptop downstairs, use the main computer as what I actually work
Yeah.
on. And I work on that computer by way of screen sharing, and then I don't have to worry about syncing.
Yeah, I do that too a little bit. It's just it's just enough slower, that like I'd much rather just build it on mine and train my volunteers that if they find a mistake, I just get screenshots or photos and text message like, hey, we changed this word to that word in a hymn this week or whatever. So, but yeah, that works too. If you can log in remotely and do it. So whether or not you use stills or motions in your presentations are entirely up to you. This is obviously a still. Oh yeah, right. Yeah. And this is obviously a motion. Wow. But it's silly. But what do your graphic choices say about your service? What's going on in your service, what the style of your service is. I will say in our traditional space, we don't use live backgrounds basically anywhere. It's all stills. And in our contemporary space, we don't really use still backgrounds hardly ever, except like behind the message and readings and that kind of thing. But during songs, we don't. But don't just pick a thing because you think it's pretty. Right? There's a lot of really cool backgrounds. I mean, I picked some of the things in here just because they're pretty, but I wasn't necessarily trying to tell a specific story with it. But if you're singing a song like "How Great Is Our God," you're singing about we're just heaping praises on the Lord, right? That song is kind of vertical, right? So if you think of it, if you got a good background that works, that's a little more vertical. Cool. And if we're singing a song about how He loves, and we're talking about the fact that Jesus loves us or the Lord loves us, and it's going that way, you can your song. Now, is anybody in the room going to get this? Mm-hmm. But if it helps a little bit, cool. Or if it just helps us be that much more intentional about what we're doing, because it's really easy to just Sunday comes with alarming regularity, and so it's easy to just be like, well, here's 5 backgrounds, they're in, right? So if you can be a little bit more intentional about everything we do, hopefully everybody gets just a little bit better. You got clouds if you're doing songs about heaven, right? There's a little bit more, of different styles. This is a little bit more traditional, a little bit more contemporary, a little more modern. It's Pentecost, and you're doing songs about the Holy Spirit or something like that. So what does the graphic say about what it is we're doing, or your Good Friday or Gethsemane, right, or Ash Wednesday or something along those lines. If you've noticed, there has not really been any religious iconography in any of these yet. Unfortunately, there are people that do it. There's not a lot that's really good, and I'd rather not use it than be like, that's cartoonish and weird, and like pull somebody out of a moment. Now there is some good stuff out there, and if you can find the right place to use it, this is Death Was Arrested, if you remember the song, Endless Love Pouring Down on Us, You Made Us New, Now Life Begins With You. Next slide begins, or the next verse begins, Our Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. And all of a sudden now you can find a spot, right, to dump something on people in the middle of a Good Friday service or whatever, and like, bang, right? Instead of singing a song about how great and fantastic Jesus is and you got him dead on the cross the whole time, like there's a little bit of can be a little bit of a disconnect there, right? Like this is not the best Easter morning background, probably, unless you're starting your Easter service from a place that starts on Good Friday, which some churches like to do. So there is stuff out there, and you can kind of use it in good spots. Yeah.
I think there's also some value maybe to we do like the sermon theme. I'll take blank background from that group of backgrounds and use that for like liturgy has the same background, and then songs and greetings will have the same background. So you can match it that way too.
Yeah. So there's a little bit. You got to search really hard to find the good stuff, and crosses are. I mean, like crosses are a kind of a. I've got a few spots. Most of the stuff I'm showing here is from churchmotiongraphics.com. Here's kind of a cool modern, right? Easter morning, yeah. Yeah. Easter morning, tombs open, little kind of a modern look instead of, a rocky, craggy thing that that's probably with, lilies all over it. That's probably not what it'll look like. That's not what it'll look like on Easter morning, probably as much as this is not what it'll look like on Easter morning. Now, if everything's bold, nothing's bold. So if you get the opportunity, take time in your services. There are certain times of year especially where visual silence can be a big and powerful and cool thing, right? If everything's bright and shiny and cool, then it's always bright and shiny and cool, and you can use this stuff to help tell your story. On Good Friday, we end our services with kind of an largely a cappella singing of Were You There, and it gets progressively dimmer and dimmer in the room, and by the time we get to the end of now here there's a lot of ambient lights, this may not work, but by the time we're done singing Were You There, it's dimmer than that in the room. But in a darkened room on your Good Friday service, and that's the only light, that's perfectly legible to people. But it's kind of an impactful thing. It also helps, you're not frying people's eyeballs, especially if you've got an LED wall in the room where it's white all the time. So don't be afraid to turn it off. When we first opened our contemporary space, we had 3 massive screens on the back wall that we just project moving images on instead of putting a bunch of moving lights and LEDs and stuff in. And we felt like we had to use it all the time, every Sunday. With every set, you had to make sure you saw it because we spent a lot of money on it. Right? Well, I finally was able to convince the people who needed convincing that we're going to cover it up and build a smaller set for a while and then bring it back, 3 months later or whatever it was. And I had comments about, I forgot about how cool the wall was and how impactful it can be in your service and that kind of thing, because we specifically took it away, because we made the choice to be a little bit more intimate, a little smaller, a little more visually quiet in our space. So don't think you always got to go bigger, badder, faster. We are very close to running out of time. We got technically 20 minutes, but I want to leave time for Q&A. So we're going to blast through color. You guys know what colors are? They're all over the place now. But again, what does the color you're using say about the song you're singing? Red could be aggressive and bold, and the blood of Jesus, the intensity of whatever's going on, energy, strength, power, passion, desire, love, warm or hot. Yellow or gold, bright, lively, celebratory, cheerful, fun, happy, optimistic, sunny, bright. So that the season that your church is in, the songs that you're singing, whatever it might be. But think about these things. Again, don't just throw backgrounds willy-nilly at the wall to see what sticks, if you can help it. So orange kind of combines red and yellows. Feel and attitude, harvest, a lot of fall, Thanksgiving, we do a lot of orangey things. Joy, sunshine, revival, encouragement. Green, we don't do a lot of green. Green just kind of looks weird in our spaces. But, spring's a great time. Easter's a great time for green. Palm Sunday, obviously, is a great time for green, right? We load up lots of green backgrounds at those times. Blue, calming, trust, cool, cold, grace, peace, heaven, sky, water, Holy Spirit. Purple, right? A lot of this stuff, right? Royalty. Lent, obviously, right? You roll out all the purple backgrounds at Lent. The blue backgrounds during Advent. Yeah, and I know I think somebody said something about their church. You just kind of use the liturgical color, right, as the background. Yeah, so that's totally a way to go. Black, Good Friday, Monday, Thursday, opening Easter services, depending on if that's where you're going. So yeah, now imagine if that was a big LED wall and you just fried everybody's eyeballs out of their head. Now, so that's white text on a white background with those shadow settings. Now, I'm not saying you should do this, but it kind of shows you what you can do. Right? Oop. So, there. I broke it. Don't go back. In a highly curated playlist, don't go back. But those are those shadow settings I was telling you about that can make basically any text legible on pretty much any background you put it on. If I'm not saying you should do this, I'm just saying you can do this if it was something you wanted to do. So, also, pick good colors. That's really all we're saying. Blue and green or cyan. Blue and yellow look good together. White, blue look good together. This is also something for your lighting guys to know. If you put an all blue background, they don't have to do all blue lights, right? They can, blue and yellow look great together, right? Blue background, yellow punchy wash on your band or whatever if you're doing that kind of thing. So helping them out when they're like, you only gave me solid colored backgrounds this week. Okay, look at here's your complimentary color list. You pull that from the internet or whatever. Just give them a little help, little push in the right direction, and they'll start being creative. On the other hand, there are groups of colors that also don't look so good together, and if you can avoid them, you should do those things. We don't use a lot of green light, especially put green light on people's skin, especially on cameras. They just look sickly and gross and disgusting. So everyone's putting stuff in boxes these days. You saw our lower thirds are white text box with black text over top of it. Sometimes it's artistic. Sometimes it's for legibility. Again, this is that shadow settings over a largely white background. Pretty legible depending on your room. If you have a lot of ambient light, may not be. So you can put kind of a again, the transparent gray box would come from your template. You don't have to drop that in all the time. You do it once, apply it to your song. There it is, all the time. That's kind of the inverse of what we do. We've done this. Actually, we've done basically everything I'm showing you. We've done at some point in our church, in our services, and this can really be helpful if you're wanting to do more of this stuff visually, but maybe you don't have the most contrasty projector, or you've got a big stained glass window or windows on the side, and you just I can't do anything but white text on a black background because it's they can't read it otherwise. You can do things to help to get around it a little bit. That's kind of basically what we look like right now on Sunday mornings on our live stream in the room. It's not that anymore. And then that box is purely artistic. For some reason, that looks better, a little cooler, a little fresher, a little more contemporary, a little more modern than if the box wasn't there. Right? But again, these are all template-driven things. And I don't think I'm going to talk about fonts because we're getting right down to the end of it. Anybody on the fence about using who are still have a pastors I don't see the point in Easy Worship, Media Shout, Pro Presenter, that kind of thing? No? Somebody want to give me a Bible verse, a passage of scripture?
John 3:16.
Give me something harder. 14 through what?
17.
Yeah, there isn't. It doesn't go that far. Oh, that was Jonah. What was it? 2, 14, 17?
Sure.
So, I pulled up the Bible module inside of Pro Presenter. I typed in what he said, and you don't even have to put if you're a Pro Presenter user, you don't have to put the colon and the slash in. You do 2 space 14 space 17. Hit enter, it pulls it up.
Cool.
So if that's not a reason, especially if you got a pastor who really likes their scripture and who really likes to call audibles, all the Media Shout, Pro Presenter, Faith Life Proclaim, basically the things that aren't PowerPoint and Keynote or overhead projectors will do this. And it's kind of it can be a game changer for people. Somebody asked about graphics and visuals. Here are some of the ones that we use or have used in the past. Church Motion Graphics. They have a couple of subscription models. There's the Pro one that's I think maybe $300 or $400 right up front. But what that does is it gives you everything they've ever done, and then I think it's $199 a year, or maybe $99 a year that will give you everything they've had going forward. So you can also just start paying the smaller price right now and just get the new things that come out. They come out with tons and tons of stuff. Shift Worship, I think somebody said they were using that one. Visual Media Church, don't have a lot of experience with them. I know a lot of churches use it. I would say take a look at them. You can view all of their libraries and see does one of them fit how we envision our church, how it is we use this stuff, because they all have their own sort of visual language. Igniter Media is another good one. They're pretty expensive, but they do things like you get motion files and Photoshop files, and actually pretty much all these get Photoshop files, but they're kind of expensive. But they've also got, and all of these guys have social media graphics, sermon series graphics, that kind of thing. So pretty much for all of our sermon series, I find one I like the look of, download it, throw it in Photoshop, and then start editing, changing out text, changing out graphics. So I get half the work done for me by doing it that way. Share Faith is the less expensive option, more economical, but their stuff is a little more entry level, I would say. And And that's why there's some Facebook groups, Worship Media Tech with Church Motion Graphics. That's a long title for it. Take a picture of that slide if you want. But a lot of people in there. If you want to say, hey, I'm doing this thing on my slides. Do you think it looks good? Put it in there. There's like 45,000 members. They'll tell you. Same thing with Church Sound Media Techs. Just good places to kind of bounce things off of the official ProPresenter user community. These are all Facebook groups. If you have specific questions about how a lot of these tools can be used, or if you're kind of headed down the right track, or if you have questions about some of these things. Yeah. Any questions? Thanks for coming, and that's my information. You can send me a text, you can shoot me an email. Are there any questions in the room before I let you all go? Yeah.
How do you feel about continuity of a specific graphic to go through the service? Would you put all of the liturgies, the readings, everything, even the songs using the same exact graphic, or would you allow the songs to have their own? So what we do, all of the liturgies, readings, the message, all of that is themed to whatever the sermon series is. And then, so that Light of the World slide you saw right now. And then the songs I generally kind of take from one family. So for the most part, I'll take from one family of one of those graphics packages. Easter, Good Friday, some of those, Christmas, some of those things, I will go outside the box a little bit more, especially trying to be more intentional with how does this graphic specifically relate to what it is we're singing about in that regard. But yeah, it can be a little jarring, especially if you got multiple songs back to back, if the backgrounds are two completely different styles or multiple completely different styles. That's a good question. Yeah, that's what works for us. Anybody else? I'm going to stick around for a little bit. I got to tear down. I really thank everybody for coming. Appreciate your time. Thank you for spending it with me. Thanks. Have a great day.